Welcome to the first ever Whiplash Cinema podcast, where we'll be discussing Damien Chazelle's odyssey into cinema, Babylon. Welcome to the first ever Whiplash Cinema podcast. We're a pop-up community cinema in central Brighton. We bring interesting, unusual, fun, overlooked cinema, both old and new, to the people of Brighton. And we're now branching out into podcasts. This is our first ever podcast. I'm Henry. I'm joined by Layla.
Hello.
I was going to say hello, but you did say hello.
Hi.
And we are going to be talking over the coming however many weeks. Hopefully we can keep this going as a podcast forever. I'd love to. I'm very excited to be doing this new thing. And we're going to be talking about film, of course, as Whitewall Cinema, as we are film nuts, enthusiasts. And it will be primarily reviews, so sort of non-spoiler reviews of mostly new films that are arriving. And also classic films, maybe in a more analysis mode, kind of getting deeper into some films that perhaps you've seen are coming up for an anniversary, and also things that you may have seen at the cinema, actually at our events, or that we've introduced you to. And this is, some way you can get kind of further, deeper into the film. I mean, we always do an introduction with our films at the cinema, which I know is one of the things that people really love about the cinema, giving the context up front. But one of the things you can't do is kind of get deeper into the movie, because sometimes you want to have a discussion about things that happen in the movie, which you don't want to talk about before the movie starts. So it'll be, sometimes you're going to be able to see a film and then come over to the podcast and actually get deeper into it with us in an analysis sense. But again, we'll always warn you, with the reviews, it's a spoiler-free experience, and with an analysis, there might be a little bit of a bigger dig into the plot. So today, seeing as this is our first podcast and it's a podcast about cinema, we're going to talk about some films from the award season, which is just now in the rearview mirror. That, of course, next award season, we'll be talking about all of the big films that are at the top of the pack. But today we're going to do something a little bit more interesting and start with a film that was just a little bit outside of the key. We want to look at a few films that are essentially about just fallen off the radar of award season. Things that really you perhaps would expect to get awards, but just haven't really been given the recognition. For some of them rightly, some of them wrongly, but they're just sort of interesting. Every year there's interesting things that fall just outside of the big hitters, the big names that the Academy and the BAFTAs and so on kind of fawn over. So today we're going to talk, and fittingly, as we're a cinema podcast, we're going to talk about a film that is about cinema. So there are a lot of these films about at the minute that are films about the cinema. I mean, personally, as a cinema enthusiast, as someone that loves cinema, I love seeing that on screen. I don't know how that experience is for a lot of people who aren't so, spending so many thousands of hours of their life just looking at film and understanding.
I think it can be seen as self-indulgent.
It can be. But, I think the entire process of film could be self-indulgent, even if it's not about film. So, but I mean, that's sort of part of the exploration, isn't it, of ideas that you don't, if you are, on a building site or whatever, you're not necessarily dealing with these ideas. And so, someone out there is dealing with these ideas because that's what they do, and so that's just part of the rich tapestry of life, isn't it? But in terms of Babylon, which is the movie we're going to be talking about first, it's by Damien Chazelle. He's the guy most people know for making Whiplash, which is the jazz musician, very tightly edited, brilliantly performed, much awarded award season movie Whiplash. The jazz musician in the conservatory in New York, right? Not my tempo, as he says. And then he directed Whiplash, and Damien Chazelle also he directed La La Land, which of course was awarded the Oscar for Best Picture, and then that was taken away because it wasn't actually awarded it. Someone just read the wrong thing in the wrong envelope and so on. You know the story, it's out there. And the one that kind of gets forgotten about, I guess, with Damien Chazelle is First Man, which is the Ryan Gosling going to the moon. Beautifully done, but kind of, I guess, somewhat forgotten about in the Damien Chazelle canon. But Babylon is this sort of epic 3-hour exploration of the early days of Hollywood. It begins in 1926, and it is essentially sets up as an exploration, at the very beginning, an exploration of the kind of debauched lives, rather detached from most people's lives, just as Hollywood, I guess, is understood to be broadly. Detached from ordinary lives, but they're living these extraordinarily hedonistic lives. Interesting, I guess, at a time before social media and very, very kind of close quarter reporting, and everyone's got a camera on their phone. They're doing these crazy, wild, hedonistic things in the privacy of their big mansions. So in a way, they sort of, I would say, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but they're getting away with a lot more than people could get away with now. I don't know, maybe there are some sort of secret, eyes wide shut parties that happen in Hollywood. I don't know, but it's kind of. I'm sure there are. But these, in a way, you can't imagine, because the film begins with an elephant being transported to a big Hollywood producer's mansion as a sort of party favor, as just a sort of moment where this elephant's going to be introduced into the house, just for the sake of, I had a party and there was an elephant that came through. I mean, that makes it sound incredibly less wild than it actually is as a party, because there's all kinds of...
that's just where it begins.
Yeah, there's all sorts of substances and, kind of...
overdosing.
Yeah, and sort of, sexual kind of escapades, and and there's jazz musicians, and
there's sort of carnival.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards, isn't
vibes.
it? So, but yeah, it begins there, and there's 3 characters that really carry the whole movie through. One is I'll have to check my my notes here, but one is Manny Torres, played by Diego Calva, who I think is maybe the main hook of the film. I mean, it's a very convoluted film, Babylon, which is both to its detriment and its credit. But yes, it's Manny Torres, who's a sort of, at the very beginning, is a jobber, a guy who does odd jobs for the studio head, but not on any production capacity. I mean, his dream is to be on a movie set. And that is, of course, realised quite quickly in the film, but he starts out as a guy who's just doing grunt work for a producer. There's Nellie Leroy, who is Margot Robbie's character, who just sort of arrives, again, very early at the parties, trying to blag her way into the party, but isn't really she's not yet a star, but she's on her way to stardom, is the idea. With her character, and her dream is also to be on a movie set. But at this point, at the very beginning of the movie, where Manny and Nellie, which is Diego Calva and Margot Robbie, come together, they're both just sort of dreaming of being in films. And then there's Jack Conrad, who is Brad Pitt's character, and Brad Pitt is a big stretch for Brad Pitt to play, I imagine, an established, well-known, good-looking movie star, and he's sort of. He's already at the top of the heap. And so these are the 3 sort of paths that intertwine in Babylon, which then they go on it's a real odyssey into the world of cinema, behind the scenes of cinema. And it has a kind of, it is at the very beginning, I think, a little bit cringe, actually. There is a moment. I mean, some people are going. Let's be upfront. Some people are going to hate this movie.
Yeah, 100%.
Some people are going to. I mean,
you would just potentially reject it as soon as it begins, but then it becomes kind of more, maybe a bit more sprawling than I expected it to be.
I think,
and spends more time with different characters and kind of goes into the life of. On a movie set.
I think it's just a bit cringe because Diego and Nellie, or Margot and Diego, their characters at the beginning are a little bit wide-eyed, partly because of the drugs that they're taking, but also
which Nelly keeps up.
Yeah, but there's a sort of general sense that, they're talking very broad strokes about cinema and how brilliant cinema is and just wanting to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a specific scene where they are taking drugs and speaking in this sort of naive, really annoying way about being a star.
But, the film then develops into this, I mean, it's a sort of unsubtle cacophony of noise, the whole film is. And through that, I think, another kind of subtlety or kind of nuance emerges through the chaos, but it's always couched in that chaos. I mean, like any Damien Chazelle film, it's a technical marvel. Like the way in which some of these scenes are shot and the way in which it's designed and the production design and, of course, the music, always top-notch with Damien Chazelle. He's obviously, I think he actually studied...
Music, jazz maybe, or classical music or something.
Well, I think something about Whiplash is autobiographical, isn't it? So, but he just, he excels in terms of music, and there's a lot of music in this film, a lot of amazing performances and musical cues, and there is another character who is a jazz musician who's maybe the fourth character down in the sort of pecking order of big characters. I think that character's name is Sidney Palmer. I might be wrong. I might be wrong, right. But so there is quite a big focus on music. But at the end of the day, it's about filmmaking, and it's sort of about there's countless references to like silent movies or early sound movies. I mean, there's so many films. I mean, and I'm not perhaps the world's foremost aficionado on silent cinema or early cinema, but I do have a good enough knowledge to know that there are, 100 different movies being referenced here. That where they're sort of taking moments from movies and feeding them into the plot, or they're just showing, telling stories. I mean, all of the stories in this movie are sort of, even though it's an imaginary world full of kind of nonsense, it's also clearly extracted from
potentially real Hollywood, or at least myths, but like legitimate kind of 20s, 30s Hollywood stories of actresses and actors.
I think you've hit the nail on the head as well, because it is a film about. It's a myth-making film. It is about the myth, the kind of mythology of Hollywood and the mythology of making movies, but also, the fact that they are the myth makers. These people, like what they're doing is making myths on screen, and I mean, basically, it's a film about the love of cinema, but in the most extraordinary, unusual approach to doing that. It's not quite how you'd expect it to be. I mean, apart from this countless kind of silent movies and early sound references, there's a big bunch of references to modern filmmakers. There's a lot of Quentin Tarantino in there. There's a lot of Martin Scorsese in there. There's even some Wes Anderson in there. The one that's most prevalent for me, and this will come up again and again, is there's a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson. This movie is in essence a retread of Boogie Nights. Like I think there's so many scenes. I mean, you talked about a drug overdose scene that happens early in the movie. That is the exact same scene that happens in Boogie Nights. Like the exact same scene, in the exact same way at a party, sneaking the person out. All the things that happen, minus the elephant. But it is the same thing. And there's even some of the sort of ways in which it's timed. A lot of the episodic bits in the film, of course. I mean, actually, the first hour really. The first half hour is really just this party, and then the next half hour, is I don't know, the process of shooting movies. It's blocked out into different sections, but a lot of the scenes work as a kind of little opera unto themselves. They sort of have a song that accompanies it in the background, and they, maybe a classical piece of music or something that's, I don't know whether it's score or, but it's each time they quite often sort of crescendo and peak with a song that's been going on, and just the rhythm of each scene builds up and builds up and builds up until there's a kind of, sometimes a sort of humorous kind of comic release at the end. But it's very much like Magnolia. Magnolia does that a lot. There's a scene in Magnolia that's the cop goes to have coffee with the girl in the apartment, and that's set to a piece of opera. But it crescendos with the music. That happens quite a lot. So it's very like Magnolia in that sense. And then it's also like there's a scene, without getting too deep into the movie, into spoilers, but there's a snake scene in Babylon that is, someone's basically on a dare, if you like, or doing a sort of stupid stunt, and it involves a scene with a snake out in the middle of the desert. And this is like highly similar, I would say, to the Sean Penn motorbike scene in Licorice Pizza.
That's true.
It's weirdly similar.
Sort of everyone coming out to watch this insane thing take place.
Yeah.
For like no reason other than just pure hedonism.
Other than they're famous and they're trying to impress
and
their
they're
gang.
kind of bored, so it's like, what can we do next to just sort of one up all the crazy shit we've already done?
Yeah. So it has all these elements, it has the musical element, it has a kind of screwball comedy element, it has a kind of epic kind of Lawrence of Arabia vibe.
It's also got Citizen Kane vibes.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
and I think William Randall Hearst is like actually in it as a character.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
Margot Robbie pukes on him at one point.
Okay. And
spoiler.
And then there's even, I would say, even the party scenes have kind of Baz Luhrmann element to them.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of, but it's a lot better than Luhrmann's Great Gatsby, even though it's sort of a lot worse, which is kind of amazing. But I think in a way, I don't know whether it's Damien Chazelle or the studio or people in general, but the first half an hour, which is this hedonistic party scene, I think probably people thought, maybe I don't know whether Damien Chazelle or the studio or whoever's involved in this production, probably thought that was the most appealing bit of the film. This is the thing that's going to hook people in and be excited about. But I actually think it might be the weakest part of the film.
Yeah. Well, I think it's what's come to be expected of him, particularly because of La La Land. If you think about how that starts, the whole thing is just very theatrical. It's very musical theatre. And so, like, he puts this very extreme scene, basically a spectacle at the beginning of the film to kind of draw in maybe a certain audience. Yeah. Or to be like, okay, here's what you want from me.
Well, you get
and then it sort of goes somewhere else.
You get the sense when you're watching Great Gatsby with Baz Luhrmann that the film really could have been confined to that party scene, had none of the other stuff in it, and been trimmed down to about, 30 seconds, and then just put a perfume at the end of it and make it an advert for a perfume. Because the party scenes are amazing in Gatsby, but then it's not a film.
No, it's
but those bits are incredible.
Yeah.
And they could just be cut down. Whereas this is like a perfume advert, but like an X-rated perfume advert, one that could never be broadcast. But it does work. But it is I think the least interesting, because an appealing bit of the movie to me, or it's the weakest part of the movie. And that's not to say it's weak, but what happens beyond the party when this kind of incredible spectacle has ended. And it does actually make a break. There's a really amazing moment where Margot Robbie leaves the house and it comes out of the house in this shot that mimics that Wizard of Oz door opening.
Yeah. And again, the sort of colour of the sky and everything. It's like it goes into colour. Yeah,
it's exceptionally obvious kind of early Hollywood reference, but it is quite clearly, that. And maybe it's also a little bit like The Searchers, where John Wayne stood in the doorway and there's this kind of darkness inside and there's this amazing world on the outside. But it's beautiful, that moment. But then, and the film is beautiful, like quite a lot. But then there's also this kind of grubby, seedy, grotesque. Something.
Toby Maguire.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that in a minute. But there is. They've had a lot. The cast seem to have had their teeth yellowed for this. I don't know if you noticed it.
I didn't notice until you said.
But there is this. There are these things.
I noticed it on Toby Maguire and his skin and everything. He just looks like he's been living in that underground.
Yeah. Again, let's not get. People are gonna have to experience that I would say that is. There's no way for us to describe those without
without giving it away.
And immediately, people not wanting to watch a podcast about the worst things that you've ever heard in your life. But yeah, and there's even, I mean, again, another filmmaking reference is that they then get into that section, which is again the second half hour of the movie. You know, we've not even got out of the first hour here, and there's a good half hour then about the movie making process at that time, about all this sort of backlot that's all kind of outdoors, where there's lots of movies shooting side by side.
But even before you get to that, I think between the party scene at the beginning and the bit where you're at the films, it's just the bit where Diego Calva goes with Brad Pitt to his house.
Yes.
Because he's like, okay, come with me, that you can sort of work with me, or you can follow me around, or whatever the deal is from the party. And he drives him home, and then you just see Brad Pitt like being, I don't know, a drunken mess at home. It's actually got a little bit of like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I thought.
Yeah, no, there's a big, but that also follows through in terms of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in terms of the way that he treats the bits of the film that are about movie making.
Yeah.
The kind of pacing of, you know, there's a bit there where, again, these are not spoilers. This is just very, you know, light investigation of the plot. But Margot Robbie's character is doing some acting quite early on in the movie, and she's being asked to kind of do. This is weird as well, because she's being asked to do produce a tear, basically, to cry, and then she's sort of like, you know, this is already a kind of feat of amazingness, and then she's asked to do it again. She's not asked to do it again. She goes, should we go again? Like, when everyone's sort of amazed that she can go again straight away to produce a tear. Two things about this. The process of that is about, like those scenes in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is where Leo DiCaprio is getting into the process of acting. Yeah. And you're watching someone acting in a movie. Then it's also the same as Boogie Nights, where different industry, a different movie industry entirely, but Mark Wahlberg's character goes, and then they're like, and he's like, do you want to go again? And everyone's amazed. Not only did he do it, but he'll do it again. Yeah, you know, it's like it's same bit.
Really, but there's something also really like sociopathic about it. Yeah, for the characters, I think it's like trying to tell you. It's almost like this person's not human, or they don't actually have proper, I don't know, emotions or empathy. You know, it's like when she can cry in this way. Yeah, because she's actually just crazy the whole time, and she shows a real lack of empathy to people around her too. And she just kind of uses people and relies on them way too much. And it's like, yeah, I can produce a fake tear for you. It just says so much about her character.
But then also there's this almost like moments of kind of Wes Anderson style humor in it, with the director that's directing Margot Robbie, when she's just like, okay, yeah, we'll go with it or whatever, and it's quite funny in a kind of detached, cool Wes Anderson way. Yeah. And it's bad, I forget this actress's name, because she's also in First Man. Oh, okay. And I think I'm right in saying she's Damien Chazelle's wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I had only seen her in First Man and this. Yeah. We'll have to to find out her name. Hang on.
Oh, is it Ruth Adler?
Is it Ruth Adler? Or is
that her? It is. That's her character name, Olivia Hamilton. Is it her? Yeah, Olivia Hamilton.
Yeah. Okay. So
she is his wife. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So but yeah, she pops up in that, and she's great in that. Yeah. I guess it's not a huge role, but she comes back a few times in terms of the movie making process.
But she is really good, actually.
Yeah, she's great in it. Like, she's fantastic. Funny. Yeah.
Just the reactions that she has to Margot Robbie, because she's kind of there. She's kind of causing a scene, but then the director's so willing to go with it, because it's like, fine, like, we're on this production line of making films at this time. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, if you're going to do that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of, she does a good job of showing, I think, like, how Margot Robbie's character is supposed to be really kind of extraordinary in that way. Yeah. And just such a performer. Yeah. And she kind of like assists Margot Robbie.
Yeah, sometimes it's not what Margot, any character, sometimes not what they do, but it's the reaction of other people around them.
Yeah, it's the reaction. I think it actually helps you to, for me, okay, I'll speak for myself. Yeah. It helps you to hate the Margot Robbie character less.
Because you don't like Margot Robbie?
I think she has limited skills.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Margot Robbie.
No, it's
I know
fine.
everybody loves
she can
Margot.
be well cast.
I know
It's
everybody
fine.
loves Margot Robbie,
Yeah.
but she's maybe not our favourite.
No hate.
Yeah.
But this character, just the small role of the director and watching her reactions to the things that Margot Robbie is doing actually kind of helps you to go, okay, I'll go with this.
Yeah. You buy in.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, there's a sort of, and then on the other side of the lot, Brad Pitt's making a film, and it's just sort of wild and out of control, and very, frivolous and hedonistic. But it's Spike Jonze is there, so you've got Spike Jonze now thrown into the mix of directors, and he's playing a director, a sort of archetypal. There's a lot of directors that came over from Europe at that time who were working in Hollywood, and he's playing I don't know what nationality
maybe a
is,
German
but
director.
he's playing an Austrian or he's playing some sort. I mean, maybe it's maybe Spike's sort of accent is not making it clear, but he is there. It's all about the process of the light and capturing the light and capturing everything at the right moment
before the light goes, which by the way,
yes, go on.
Brad Pitt is also struggling with coming to the end of his career and having to realize that he might be too old for what he's doing. And there's a gossip columnist who's kind of writing about him in an unfavorable light.
The light is fading.
The light is fading on Brad's career.
But then Manny has to go and get a camera, and that, again, it sounds like simple stuff, but it's very drawn out, very operatic, and done with real brilliance and flair and technical expertise. And it's very exciting, I think, if you're into cinema, even though it's convoluted and kind of, I think for a lot of casual film goers, they're going to reject this kind of, people don't like these, I think generally, and I understand it, but people don't like these kind of messy, long, convoluted, I mean, make it sound terrible,
but people like a very tightly knit narrative, beginning, middle, and end thing. And this is not that. Speaking very broadly, but This is not that.
This is not that. And
but it has so much more to it.
Yes, and the way that's all, I mean, it's almost like Spielberg's 1941.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like it's a wild ride.
It's an ensemble.
Yeah.
Mess.
Yeah. or
but fun.
To use the comparative, Scorsese's New York. Yeah. Just kind of
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Because it's all like, okay, you're here, and we're really just wanting to show LA and the landscape, and here's 50 characters that crop up throughout. Yeah. And you're kind of just getting a taste of it's kind of like if you were to go to LA and have a couple of wild days in LA, and then you'll be like, what just happened? Yeah. It gives you that feeling.
But then there's also, there's a lot about the kind of industry. And I think in a way it's a bit like the process of working through things. Again, it reminded me of Scorsese's The Aviator. That's of course a long film that goes over a long period of time and follows people's attempts to create or do certain things, achieve certain things, and this does that same.
Yeah, and I think it's nice because it does have different tangents and different, there are minor characters and sort of background characters who work in the industry, but they're not the stars of the show. I'm thinking of the I don't know her name, but I'm going to say the Asian American woman who is a performer, or no, she performs at the party, she sings, she's kind of cabaret.
Yeah.
But what does she do? The titles on the film?
Yeah, the
silent movie titles.
The silent movie titles, the words of the characters that are speaking in between scenes.
So it's got characters like this that are actually.
But she's also this underground performer that is the toast of the kind of parties that these people throw, and she's seen as a kind of big figure, almost kind of mythical, performer that they all kind of love.
Yeah. But. You follow characters like that, and it's it'll just go away from them, and then it'll come back and it'll weave them in, and you sort of realize the significance of them, which is a lot of times just tangentially, she becomes significant. They have to get rid of her because of, I don't know, the relationship she has with Margot Robbie's character at one point. Yeah. But it makes you feel like you're actually invested in these background characters too, and it's nice that it goes.
And this singer, as you say, again, no spoilers here, but this singer comes back into the plot at one point and meets with Brad Pitt at a party, and then Brad Pitt goes off from the party, and I won't spoil because it's these are all major plot points, but the exact same scene happens in Boogie Nights again.
Yeah.
The exact same thing,
Yeah.
in the same way, with the same pacing. It's bizarrely Boogie Nights, like through and through and through. But it is really a film. It's about. There's so much about. I mean, like it's a film about the magic of Hollywood, the extremeness of Hollywood, the folly of it.
Yeah.
The kind of mad.
But also the way it kind of chews people up and spits them out, and they can end up.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the madness of
Nothing.
Hollywood, and then I was going to say the kind of near-death experiences, or sometimes kind of death experiences of just like extras or something, you know, of like how wild it is.
Yeah.
You know, again, this myth-making about the myth-makers, that's what this film is, you know. But there's a kind of sheer love of cinema in this movie that I think you don't get. I was kind of surprised. We won't talk about this movie, but another movie that was kind of in the mix at the same time was The Fabelmans. And The Fabelmans, of course, Steven Spielberg's story about himself, or well, you know, it's a mostly, you know, I mean, people would talk about is it true or not true, but you know, this story about Spielberg's childhood and how he became a filmmaker. But it's really about his family.
Yeah.
And it is about the kind of cost of being a filmmaker or having that kind of point of view. But it isn't really on the level in terms of like how much it is about the love of cinema as a movie like this. This is really about whether it be the industry or whether it be the process or whether it be the
silence
or whether it be the kind of side things like the parties or just a production line process, you know, the technical process. I mean, there's like scenes of like, you know, film being fed into the loops of a camera, you know, quite, you know, front and center.
Yeah.
Or there's a whole sequence in the movie which is essentially about sound. When sound arrives in the second hour of the movie, I mean, blimey, we've only got to the second hour of the movie. And it's
quite a brutal scene.
Yeah.
And it makes you sweat.
Well, it is a kind of replay, and we might talk about this briefly again, and again, trying to not spoil it, but it's a replay of a scene that happens in singing
Boogie
in
Nights.
Not Boogie Nights, no, in this case Singing in the Rain, about the invention of sound and how cameras had to then be static, and you know, the difficulty of recording sound in the early days, not just from a technical point of view, because you've got to hang it here. If you want to hang it somewhere else in the shot and you want to hear someone speaking in a different place, you have to move the microphone. The actors have to hit their mark. They have to say it just at the right time. People can't have a watch on, or people can't be wearing a certain...
You can't open the door of the studio
you can't
a lot.
to the sound stage, because you let the sound of the word... I mean, there's so many things. And the camera has to be in this box because you can't... The sound of the camera, of the film ticking over, is too loud for the mics on the soundstage. So there's all these things, and I mean, one of the things is about movie making at times, it kind of got ruined by the fact that, you know, you couldn't have these dynamic camera moves or anything. You couldn't do anything with the camera anymore because you had to just put it where the camera went inside this box, because you had to protect it from the sound if you wanted sound. Of course, sound was sort of like, you know, it was like when colour came along or 3D or whatever, people forget that sound was really just seen as a gimmick. You know, a lot of people didn't take sound seriously as something that you should have in your movies, you know, and the real art was movies without sound.
And then there's the aspect of silent actors when they finally do make a sound movie, like with Brad Pitt. It's not much of a spoiler, but you know, you will receive different criticism and people might actually be shocked by how you sound.
Which is the same scene that happens in The Artist.
Yeah,
but
I was
anyway,
going to say.
and it's the same scene that happens in Singing in the Rain, and so on. But there is the whole sense that the cinematographer, and the film is making quite an obvious point, that this is the death of the cinematographer. Quite, you know, it is literally, there is no more... you can't use the camera in any way that's more dynamic than just keeping it inside a box. Yeah. So when the second hour arrives, sound also arrives at the same time, and it's a sort of harbinger of doom for everybody. And I mean, the downward spiral begins for a lot of people. Again, Boogie Nights. But you know, it also moves on in another way, which is this is sort of, you know, you're talking about people being judged differently before and after sound. The sort of pre-code debauchery the sort of pre-sound debauchery. Then it moves into this code era, and there's a sort of puritanical
PR side of things.
Yeah, that's both on, that is on screen and of course off screen, because the gossip magazines and so on will capture these things, and so there becomes
an attempt is made to kind of save Nellie as an actress,
clean up the image. But then there's also a sort of element that they try to get in here, which is a sort of grotesqueness of the upper class. And we're getting a kind of triangle of sadness, even with we mentioned maybe a light spoiler about vomit earlier, but there's a lot of vomit in Triangle of Sadness, and that appears in the same moment, in the same commentary about the upper class and people with money and their kind of folly and their kind of arrogance. And it comes, so I mean, it's almost like it's referencing that as well. And there's a sort of sense of there's moments where she's trying to rehabilitate her career, and she's sort of, the audience that she's going for are the upper class, because she wants to, the sort of power players, polite society, and she sort of, in a sense, she sort of dies in front of this audience because they don't, it doesn't go quite so well. And the same with Brad Pitt, literally, because his character's, now in the sound era, he's kind of dying in front of the audience, because people just sort of, not only can his character die in a movie or whatever, those kind of references, but literally there's a scene where he's looking at people watching him in a movie, and they're laughing at his performance because I don't know exactly what what's weird about that scene where the audience are laughing at Brad Pitt is that it's like, I think the audience seemed quite pathetic and childish.
Yeah. But people would have been like that, and they would have, it's kind of just like they would have thought that sound was a funny thing to hear in films. And it seems like, I don't know, maybe it ruins people's perception, because they will have ideas. I mean, you would imagine what you think an actor would sound like, and you kind of get to put that in the film yourself. And then you're just confronted with what they actually sound like. It might be funny.
What I got from it,
unexpected.
The idea is that he's maybe not a very good actor.
Well, he seems stiff or something. It's like
his line delivery is stiff.
Yeah, he's not helped by sound.
But what I get from the scene is that Damien Chazelle is almost like taking. I mean, it's a risky game to play when you've got an audience, and this is one of the reasons why people reject it, because he does take all these big risks throughout it. But it's almost like he's saying about all the times that he's made a film and it hasn't been received in the right way.
Yeah.
That there is a reality that people react to it in a way that this is not very good. And he's like mad, I think, as a director. He's mad at people scoffing at the time and effort and craft, because a lot, I mean, even though Pitt's characters is shown as self-indulgent, there is a lot of effort on everybody's part to get to the point of filming the scene that then eventually, that you might see on screen. And Giselle almost feels like he wants to ridicule the audience, even though it feels like Pitt's character is being ridiculed.
Yeah.
He wants to ridicule the audience. They seem pathetic for mocking Brad Pitt away. That they seem childish and juvenile, and that they haven't really understood it. But that again, it's all about every aspect of the movie. Is industry is in here. It's like the machine of it, the responsibility of making
also
movies,
just like the camaraderie of it. I think.
Yeah.
The way the characters lean on each other when they're all going through their respective breakdowns.
Yeah, and when I was going to say about the responsibility, there's a sort of scene where the jazz musician is put through a very humiliating moment, which is actually centered around racism essentially, but the reason that he has to go through this is because the kind of machine demands it of him. That, in order for him to get where he wants to get, and now all these people that rely on him, that's the thing, crucially, people that he does not want to let down, he has to do something which is basically unspeakable on camera. And he has to do it because the machine demands it of him, and there's no other way. I mean, there's no other way out of the situation other than to let everybody else down. And so he's kind of cajoled in doing it. And it has these career arcs that are that are really interesting. And in some ways, it's like there's another film that it references, I think, which is Birdman, or the virtue of whatever the Michael Keaton, some of the scenes in that to do with the criticism. And there's an interesting scene in it where they're talking about the repetition, of things. That there'll be 100 more conversations like this. The history will play these things out and again, which is what the film is doing. It's playing out things that have happened in films or things that have happened in the production of films, and you've sort of seen a lot of these things again. But it is the repetition of it. It's the reappearance of these things, the reintroduction of these scenes and these ideas that make Babylon such a fascinating movie, even though in some ways you feel like you've seen it all before. Sometimes when people steal from other movies, I kind of get annoyed because you feel like it's just a copy. But I think there's like a real method to Chazelle's like reintroducing like so many densely packed references all the way through the movie, because it is about people go through these people will make the same movies again and again. People will make movies in the same way or in different ways, or have these conversations over and over again. And again, you'll have to watch it to really understand that. And maybe you won't, you might have to watch it several times to really get that.
It's one of those types of movie, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, all the characters have, the whole thing about Brad Pitt's character is that he sort of is so desperate for something new. He wants this kind of modernity. But it comes back to bite him that he does want that, because in the end, sound comes and, he keeps talking about furniture and design, and, he wants to like push the boundaries because he's basically bored of being a sort of, movie star. And when it finally comes, it's like a mistake for him.
Yeah.
But
then he continues, doesn't he? I mean, I remember at one point he gets a phone call, and basically the upshot of it is like, this is going to be a shit movie. And there's no money in it or whatever. But he just does it anyway because it's like, what else do you have? This is your life.
Yeah.
And what transferable skills do you have?
And there's a theme in it which is spoken to Brad Pitt, which is about that, despite all of these things that happen, whether it be these behind the scenes parties, these terrible falls from grace, these mistakes, these productions that go awry or whatever, it's like what gets on screen is forever. That movies, once you've shot it and it's in the can, it comes back again and again in the movie. It's like it is forever. Once you've got it on film, it's preserved it will live long beyond your lifetime, and it's a sort of beautiful thing in that. So there is this like, not just,
it's kind of ironic because the gossip columnist tells him that, and the same could be said for her words on paper. She's okay going around doing little gossip columns and writing just horrible things about actors and actresses who are struggling.
So there is a whole sort of, Chazelle has basically introduced all sides of the coin, like every side of the movie making coin. That's why it's 3 hours. Because every side of the movie making coin is there, from the point of view of, I don't like it when people watch my movies and scoff at them. How terrible you are, people, for doing that. And aren't movies amazing and magic, and I'm so in love with it, and they'll last forever, and they're a beautiful thing. Like that, all of that, everything in between, like bitterness and pain and pleasure and joy and hatred, and like, everything's in there. And in a way that mirrors, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but the end of the movie is set in a movie theatre. There's a section where one of the characters is watching a movie, and it sort of recasts a very famous movie, which is about this era, which is a comedy. It recasts it as a tragedy. You see now, you'll know this movie probably, and it sort of shows elements of this movie which are basically about filmmaking, an older movie, a classic movie, and they're played for comedy in the movie. But actually, when you know the story of the film. Of Babylon, sorry.
And of the character.
You realise that there's actually, these things aren't just funny. Even though Hollywood people in the future, from his point of view, will make, or at the present as it is, because late in the movie and time has moved on, are making fun of it. There's also there's a story behind, all these people are real people who are all really trying to achieve something, who are really trying to do something. And it's very famous, as seen, I guess, on Twitter, because it has like it then cuts in lots and lots and lots and lots of different movies, literal references to movies, and it's sort of a weird history of cinema. in a weird way, but in a very odd way. But it's a divisive scene, but I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's really powerful. If you love movies, it's really powerful. If you're not like a big movie lover, it might not impact.
Be jarring.
Yeah, it'd be jarring. But I think as someone who, if you're really a lover of cinema, then you'll look at this and reappraise the way that you look at cinema and reappraise. And that's what these, that's the point of a movie, is to help you reappraise something. And if the movie is about movies, then it should somewhat allow you to reappraise how you understand or see movies or movie making. It's basically like the last scene is basically, it's a tragedy, but then it's also still magical. That's the point of it. It's sort of everything. Cinema is everything. If you're really into cinema, it is everything. And that's what, for Damien Chazelle, it clearly is his whole world, his whole life. I guess that and jazz music. But and then just before, I should just say there is a section in the movie with Toby Maguire, which I promise we come back to, which we won't spoil for anybody, but well, it's a wild ride, that excursion, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know what to say about it without giving any of it away, but my God.
Even if we were giving it away, there's almost nothing you could say about it.
That's true. That would make any sense.
But it is a real deep, dark dive into the underbelly of Hollywood.
Yeah. And they go and meet with Toby Maguire because Margot Robbie owes him or his people some money from gambling debts. I believe that's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then it takes a turn.
Yeah. And it's a wild turn, yeah. So, I mean, even when we talked about plot points in this, it's so dense, this movie. I don't think it's, apart from the kind of shock factor of what happens in some of those scenes, you can't really spoil this movie because it's just it's a world unto itself. It's so many little details, so many little scenes, so many little things that feeds into everything else. I think you could watch this movie. Watching it back, I know I'd seen it once and you'd seen it once, and then I watched it back. I enjoyed it much more the second time than I thought I was going to do. I thought it was going to be a chore, but actually I think it will probably, I don't know, you probably think you'll be more sick of it on the first viewing than you are when you come back to it and you start to see all the kind of genius that is wrapped up in it. But, I mean, I don't know, what was your impression? Was it a movie you enjoyed?
Yeah, I enjoyed it more than I expected to. Just based on, well, I don't want to sound silly.
Yeah.
Based on the trailer.
Yeah.
But,
but that's where you get it from.
That does matter because it's one of the reasons that it ends up overlooked at the Oscars because, less people go and see it. And there are like political reasons why certain films are awarded and others are ignored. And
one of the reasons it might not have been rewarded is because it's actually a bit brutal about Hollywood.
Yeah. That is true.
I mean, it has all the magic and the worshipping of cinema, but it also has all the horror and the just sort of like blunt, hard-nosed and kind of debauchery and things that Hollywood does not want to be portrayed as are all in there as well. It's the complete picture. Yeah, I think.
In the same way that I think like that's one of the good things about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Because it has all of these crazy aspects and it has the like surface level LA, but then it has that dark, horrible underbelly and like that is based on real fact, real things that happened. Obviously it's like twisted it, but like Tarantino's twisted the story, but it goes into those horrible, the things that you want to pretend don't exist.
Yeah.
But like that come to the surface.
Or the things that
eventually.
Hollywood pretends.
Yeah.
That they don't want. Yeah.
It does go into that, and I mean that's kind of some of the most fascinating. If you're interested in like dark Hollywood tales, and, debauchery.
Yeah, but this is the ultimate dark Hollywood tale, isn't it? And again, I guess I'll just summarize by saying that not everybody's going to enjoy this movie. It is a complex movie.
But I'm someone who thought that I wouldn't enjoy it, and then actually, like, it's made an impression on me, and I think I probably will watch it again. Yeah. And I could see myself enjoying it even more. So.
And then, but also, it is a complete picture of Hollywood in all its most extreme forms, both the bad, the good, and the indifferent. And the kind of, whether it be the technical processes or the wild, hedonistic kind of behind-the-scenes stuff, like, everything's there. And so I'm really pleased that a lot of people are not going to like it, but I'm really pleased that Damien Chazelle's made it, and it might be my favourite Damien Chazelle
I was just going to say that I think it wasn't just based on the trailer that I thought I wouldn't like it, but like I was thinking about La La Land, and like sometimes as much as I watched La La Land and was like impressed like anyone else was, I can also be sickened by like musical theatre vibes and like here's a number, a dance number, you know, a song and dance.
It's pretty cheesy, La La
Land.
Land.
But I thought that Babylon would have a bit more of that. I thought it would be a bit more, now we're going to break out into a dance. And it had that element without actually doing that, because it was situated in like Hollywood parties in mansions. So it did it in a way that like it was justified and it wasn't just a straight up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it did it, and it had the reason for like, it's about Hollywood and it can bring in like Hollywood musical vibes, but it doesn't have the element that La La Land has, which always turns me off because I'm like, I don't want to be faced with this. Like,
yeah, because it has a brutalness and a seediness and a grittiness that La La Land doesn't have, which is purposeful.
I think works in its favour.
Yeah, it's purposeful.
Yeah.
And you know, not to talk too much about La La Land, but La La Land's basically like a technical marvel as well.
Yeah.
But it's just it's a bit meandering for what seems to be not quite good. I mean, La La Land is essentially New York, New York.
Yeah, I mean, La La Land to me, just going to say it, the opening scene to me is like High School Musical.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but High School Musical,
which I love.
High School Musical done with a real high level of technical prowess,
of course,
but that doesn't.
But like
that doesn't avoid the.
There's still
toying.
A cheesiness to it that I just can't see past.
Yeah, yeah. Well, to me, it was like, I mean, I don't know if we've ever looked at this stuff, but the Jack Demy musicals was quite similar to La La Land, and there's a sort of artifice that I think maybe he's going for there that's kind of missed in the Hollywood production, rather than Jack Demy's like the French, you know, kind of new wave kind of musicals, essentially. I mean,
but I guess like any of that musical element that exists in this film is done with more maturity, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating.
It is more in the vein of Whiplash in that sense.
Yes, but much more developed. Again, Whiplash was just a short film that was stretched out. This is like amazingly Hollywood history compacted into 3 hours.
Yeah.
So it's like a long film, but there's still almost not enough time in the film.
Definitely, I didn't watch it and think, oh, this is so long. It felt like this could go on.
Yeah.
And I would be fine with it.
Yeah, yeah, but not everybody's going to feel like that, are they?
No.
I think a lot of people will probably be turned off by it. But if you're into movies, I'd recommend it. But then I don't know if I would recommend it to everybody. So, but I thought it was fascinating.
I'd recommend everybody try it.
Yeah.
Give it a go.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, everyone. And hopefully you'll join us on another, at the cinema, of course, but on another White Wall Cinema podcast in the near future. Maybe there's one you can click on now and listen to straight away. But otherwise, we'll see you soon.